All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's go time. Hello, yeah, thank you. Wow. My name is Charlie Vogelheim. I'm an alleged millbilly. I know that because at one point in my life, I walked in a Little League parade with Larry Brink's name on my back. So, everyone know who that was? Larry Brink Motors, the Lincoln Mercury dealer on Miller Avenue. Once again, on behalf of the Mill Valley Historical Society and the Mill Valley Library, thank you very much for coming to the first Wednesday talk, which for those of you that are really into calendars, it's not the first Wednesday, but it's close. It is a Wednesday. We're happy about that. And we do it as much as we can on the first Wednesday, and next month will be on the 5th. So thank you again for being here. As it said, we were going to have two speakers, Gareth Loy and Steve Quarles. Gareth couldn't make it. So we will be focusing on the Alpine Club, and we won't be covering the Tourist Club. Although there's a couple people in here, and we can have a little bit of the conversation continue, or we get out early because our latest atmospheric rivers around us, or whatever's going to happen. We'll pay attention to all of that. But again, we thank you all for being here. So let's get right to it. Steve, great guy, a member of the California Alpine Club since 2015, one of the trustees, and if you didn't know, the trustees are responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of the lodge and the property. And he is a California Alpine Club historian. In his professional life, research and outreach efforts focused on durability, in-service performance of buildings subjected to wildfire exposures. So, boy, if there's time, we can all talk about how we don't have insurance anymore. BS degree from Virginia Tech, MS and PhD from University of Minnesota, 27 years with the University of California as a cooperative extension advisor, and 8 years with the Insurance Institute business. Oh, there's the insurance, okay. Home Safety Research Center in Richburg. Ladies and gentlemen, Chief Scientist for Wildfire and Durability, although it says retired, I'm sure he wants to talk all about it. Please welcome Steve.
Thanks very much. Thanks for coming and filling every seat in the room. I really appreciate that. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here today. I'm going to talk about the Alpine Club. So I want to thank my wife for helping me with this. So just in case, you think it's all me, it's not. So Alpine Club, like many clubs, has a lodge, and we have two of them. So these is what you're looking at here. The one in Mill Valley is on your left, and the one at Echo Summit is on your right. Not in any particular order. I'm going to talk about these things, how we began, how we acquired our lodges, and some of the things that we do. An example of some of our trips, which back in the day, we don't call them that anymore. Renee, maybe we want to start calling them that again, but they called high trips, and they weren't really high trips from a 60s perspective. They were high trips because they went high into the Sierras. Yeah, and that I'm going to stick to that. And then I'm just going to talk about some of our in the past members, and this is largely because I thought they were interesting and pretty impressive. So we're just it's kind of arbitrary because you can say that any member is special. We think that, but some are more special. So I'm going to talk about these things. A lot of what I know, the club was founded, depending on how you define found, but it was so 1913, 1914. I wasn't around back then. So even though, so a lot of what I know is based on things that other people wrote. And there are two basic ways that I found out what about the club. And one is reading the minutes. The first set of minutes are on your left, and they were handwritten and but easy to read because back then people knew how to write. And then our newsletter, Trails. That's a copy of an example of on the right. We started publishing Trails in 1920. We thought about publishing Trails in 1916, but there was a war about to begin from our perspective, but and things were cost a lot, I guess, and so we didn't do that. The one thing I like in reading these things is how people wrote back then, because I don't ever use the word abeyance, but they do. So so they held in abeyance until later, and later was 1920. And in 1920, 21, 22, our trails newsletter was actually like an annual publication. It was once a year, and it was thick, and we had advertisements and all sorts of things, and many stories. And then it became not a weekly thing, a monthly thing. And in the summertime, it's, we combine. We do what everybody does. And, many people are on vacation, so you have 2 months of a trail and as an issue. Anyway, so a lot of what I know is from these documents, and so I'm going to refer to them now and then. And that's how I'm going to tell you what I know about our history. We do have a constitution, and the first one, this is too much to read, really. The thing that interested me was the fact that our first set of bylaws talked about going in untrailed areas, so bushwhacking. And I guess we did that. Our current constitution and bylaws don't mention bushwhacking at all. But we, other than that, we had similar kind of issues out in the Alpine Club as a hiking and social club. We have many members of the Alpine Club here today, and I suspect members of the Tourist Club here today. And hiking is important, but as I have found out, social is important. And there are some pretty funny lines that you can read about social things. So anyway, and in case I'm missing something, so we've always had the hiking part. There has been an environmental part. Early in the club's history, environmental issues were much more written about, let's say, than now. We took on certain topics, and we would write letters, and we would advocate for. We don't do as much of that these days, but definitely in the early part of the club, we did. And the untrailed part, I think the little bottom part was was interesting to me because we did a lot of trail maintenance and maybe even building trails. We did help build trails. I don't think we initiated trails our own selves, but we did. At one time, there was an Alpine Club trail. I can't find it anymore, but it was there sometime. And we would buy stuff to help us maintain trails. And we had something that said, one guy on the trail, one person. I think back in the day it would be one guy, but to carry things in order to clear the trail if need be. So that was interesting thing. So let's see. So we've talked about. Here we are now. How we became. So in 1913, and Phil might be able to help me with this because I'm not quite sure whether it was the San Francisco Call or the Call Bulletin at the time of 1913. I've done some looking around, and I got the impression that the Call Bulletin was soon, and then the call itself was later. But theoretically, this newspaper called the Call, which became ultimately the Call, was earlier. Thank you. So then it maybe was the Call in 1913. Okay. When you were young? Yes, sorry. And my better half has reminded me repeat the doggone question. So I'll do that going forward because I don't remember it now. Yeah. The Call came first, and the Call Bulletin call merged with the bulletin and became the call bulletin. What a deal. Anyway, so there was these stories in the call saying, get out there and hike. And that caused certain people to do that. And back in the day, this was before 1913, before the Golden Gate Bridge, during the time of ferries and whatnot. And so people would gather often at the ferry terminal in San Francisco, come to Sausalito, take the train to Mill Valley. And in 1913, there was the gravity train, thank you very much, that took us to the top of the mountain. And it was an inexpensive amount of money in today's dollars, but it's probably expensive back then. So I think Alpine Club members walked. But because of this newspaper article, people started meeting and coming over here and elsewhere, but came over here, let's say, hiked to the top of Tam, and that those people sort of got together. It was many from the YMCA Boys Hiking Group, and then others joined that. And initially in April, that became the Call Bulletin Club, which was this hiking club. And then about a year later, we changed the name of Call Bulletin, jettisoned any reference to the Call Bulletin, and renamed ourselves a California Alpine Club. And that was April 14th, 1914. You had one thing you had to be a member of the California Alpine Club. Well, two things. You had to be of good moral character. I don't really know how they defined that. And you had to have $2 in your pocket, $4 to begin with. And we had pretty soon, 80 or so paying members. So that's how we started. So we are 110 years old, or 11 now, I guess. But still, many of our members were in San Francisco, and so our things were over there, and we would bring them over here when we needed them. We had a particular active member back in the day named Bill Halliday. He owned a stationery store on Mission, and his store had his stuff in it and our stuff in it. And we would meet there, for example. So that happened for a while, for 6 years, let's say. And then there became a need to find another place to store stuff and to have meetings, because Bill's store was getting kind of crowded. And so they found place in a building called the Pacific Building, and it was the address of the club was 535 Pacific Building. There was nothing else about it, which surprised me. But after doing some looking, it looks like it was this building at now 4th and Market. This building was built in 1907 after the earthquake, and this architect, Whittlesey, became well known for building these reinforced concrete buildings that the city of San Francisco called out for, and he answered the call and built this one and others. But so our office became here, and it was here for a pretty long time. One of those rooms in there, and who really knows where. Anyway, so that was sort of our beginning in terms of where we held our meetings. There became a need, the club felt, to have a presence on the mountain, on Mount Tam. And so people started looking around. And Bill's place was bulging at the seams, as it said. Odd to me, because it took us a long time to move anything to this place, even once we found it. So we found this, according to our records, was owned by a Berkeley professor named Professor Turner. So I've looked through Berkeley online things, and I can't find this guy. So who really knows? But our records can't be all that wrong, I suppose. So anyway, we found this place on the mountain, and Professor Turner was recently married, and his wife did not like the place. So he was fairly willing to sell the place, and he did. And as has been the case, I think, with our club. We bought the place basically because we had some generous members that had a little bit of extra change in their pocket. And 3 or 4 of them ponied up a large amount of the money needed to buy the place, and we did. So this Bill Holliday, he was like the first member and very active his entire career. We have, oh, for crying out loud. Do you really care about my Zoom account? I'm hoping you don't. It didn't show up? Oh, just me. Okay. Okay. So it's a sad. So I was reading about him, and that's a little asterisk down there. He was a trustee. Everybody knows what a trustee is now because of the introduction. He was a trustee from the beginning to the end at this place, and it was a very tragic death. It was sort of an interesting story because I think it's what can happen when you're on a trip away from a car. He was in this camp, and he had to be hauled out on a mule train, I think, to Bishop, let's say. And he didn't recover, but he made it all the way out. It was just amazing to me. Anyway, it was a sad story about this very very important person in the club's history. This guy. So I felt some sadness at this. Anyway, so there you go. We have this lodge. It isn't much. If you look at it now, it's much bigger. It was not much to write home about. It had really, it was for the women to have a place to sleep. The men, as you see here, had to sleep elsewhere or get out of the place before everybody woke up. And the first order of business, though, was to renovate the kitchen, which was a wood stove, dining room, and then most importantly, I suppose, is create the septic system. And this is just a picture of the lodge from a further remove. So nice view. The thing that struck me is kind of funny. So that's my finger, and right by my finger is the lodge. Now this is Panoramic Highway running up, and you'll notice that it stops. Well, who can't see that? It stops. There, it's sort of where the mountain home is now, but it didn't go any further. And so the lodge was sort of near the end of a car access, but it definitely had access by vehicle at the time. That sort of sets the stage of where we were in the scheme of things. You can see this is from a 1928 map from a railroad company. And you see that the mountain railroad tracks are on there. The gravity car, the railroad line down to Muir Woods is on there. And interesting to me also, Matt Davis was a member of the club, and you'll notice, I'll point to it in a second, I'll show this map later on. But what is following what seems to be the Matt Davis Trail at the time was a pipeline trail feeding the Belvedere Reservoir, which is down the hill from here. And the area behind the club now is Edgewood Boulevard, Edgewood Avenue, and it was also just the pipeline trail. So Nora didn't change, but the pipeline changed to that. And the other interesting thing is back in the day, the West Peak was the tallest peak. Something happened there in the World War II that, anyway. Yeah, they did. Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the lodge. So when the lodge was purchased, the kitchen consisted of a wood stove, and there was, I suppose this is sort of partly true, but a four-course meal were 4 varieties of beans being heated up on top of this wood stove. It made for a good story. I don't, maybe that wasn't really the case, but it definitely was a story. And in the wood stove would hang around until electricity came. I don't know why I didn't write that year down. Electricity came before natural gas, anyway, and then natural gas came in 1950. Before 1950, there were these stories of propane gas tanks just sort of taking up space because they used them a lot. And the other thing I didn't really know was that the brand name was Shellane, I suppose from Shell, but it was LPG in like a propane gas tank that we might have today for your grill. Anyway, so that came in 1950, and then no more of these canisters hanging around. And so the one thing about the history of the club is you sort of grow, that you develop with you sort of follow the development of the town. Delayed because of where it was, along the way, wood to electricity to gas. There you go. So shortly after we bought the lodge, we started to want to buy something else because, the men, I suppose, didn't really like sleeping outside or such. And so we started to try to buy adjacent properties. And if you've been to the club, you know that the area to the left, to the north of the club really isn't huge. But if you look at this map, I don't know how easy it is to see, but there are 6 plots that are sort of within that red boundary, 6 lots, and we had to buy them all. And well, we did buy them all. I mean, but in the minutes, it was, maybe it's just my sense of humor, but I thought it was sort of funny that in May of 1926, we authorized the treasurer to write a check to buy the adjoining lot, it says, but I'm not quite sure whether that was lot or lots. But then, two meetings later, regarding this, Mr. Adams didn't want to sell. And that was the extent of the entry in the minutes. Just, oh, well. But we didn't give up, and we definitely ended up buying the adjacent lots and built what was then called the men's dormitory. And we bought it for a whopping $620. And I've did the calculator. I kind of forget what it was, but I think it's more something like, in today's dollars, it's $12,000 or $13,000. Still a pretty good steal. And because there's no way that land would be $12,000 worth of land. So this is a picture of the men's dormitory in 1936. It was for the men. There isn't a kitchen down there. But the thing, again, that struck me as funny is that, so when the club began, almost every member was quite young, younger than I am even. And they were youngsters. And so, but even by 1935, we're getting old. And so we have to have private rooms that are for older members. And that is if you've been to the lodge, you know that the lodge has mostly beds in the middle of the room, and you pull a curtain around them, and that's your room. This building here, the men's lodge, the men's dorm, which we now call the Tam building, it has rooms. You can close a door and it's a bed or 2 or 3 beds in there, but it's largely individual rooms. There's one dormitory room that has umpteen beds in it. But anyway, I thought that was cute. So we got this. This is before building codes, I'm thinking. Definitely here it is, and in 1925 it was. We did a lot of this construction with club labor, and I suppose back then they had people a lot more handy than me that were members because they did it all. And here's this just sort of a then and now. So the things that have changed, well, the Tam building looks about the same, just a lot more vegetation. And I guess that we see that everywhere we go. But you know, the windows are the same as today. You can sort of see, we painted the building. This is a black and white shot, so who knows what color it was on the left, on your left, right? And this is a brand new red painted building. It's one of the things the trustees do is hire people to paint these days. So that's that. The last major thing that has happened to the lodge was in 1952 to 4, and that is extending the lodge to create a social hall. Hertenstein was one of the 3 major guys in the club. He was an architect, so I think that's sort of handy because he designed the social club and oversaw the construction. By 1954, you did get inspected. So we did have to do that, but you know, we did all the other work. And this is just a picture of that social hall being built, and we call it the social hall. It's been called the recreation hall. It's named after Hertenstein, the architect, because of his contributions to the club. He's one of the 3 guys, as I said, Hertenstein, Holiday, and Pinther is the other one, who I think every member of the club knows these 3 names, if nothing else, because they were members from the beginning and really gave their sweat equity and financial support to the lodge over time. So interesting story about our fireplace in the social hall. There's a thing called the Federation of Western Outdoor Clubs, and it is a group of Western outdoor clubs, of all things. And in 1931, one of these member clubs, the Mazama Club up in Portland, they built a lodge on Mount Hood. And they wrote around to all the other clubs in the Federation asking for stones to put in their fireplace, and you could write your name on that stone. And so we did that. It was another kind of head scratcher to me, because in the trails and in the minutes, they're talking about going who knows where into the Sierras to find a rock to give to the Mazama Club. And finally, someone came to their senses, and they went to Mount Tam and found a rock and put Alpine Club on the rock and sent it up there. So that happened in 1931. And so in 1954, we're building this social hall, and we do the same thing. So we send a letter out to members of the Federation and ask for rocks that are meaningful to them. And sure enough, we got a lot of responses, and some of them are here. So in the center picture, you see the fireplace. Unfortunately, sadness, it's not a functional fireplace anymore. It's not even a functional gas fireplace anymore. It looks like a fireplace place. But you can see Berkeley Hiking Club, the Contra Costa Hills Club, the Obsidians, that's Eugene, Oregon, and then the Mazama, upper left. That's the people that asked us back in the day in 1931 to do this solid for them, and we did. So this is a cool fireplace, I think. And maybe if we can get our act together, it'll be actually a fireplace one of these days again. We've talked about a television with a fire in it. That's not very outdoor clubby, I don't think. Yeah, my fellow trustee back there gave me the thumbs down, so Just forget I ever said that. Yeah. So the next thing in our development was another lodge. We spent a lot of time going on these high trips into the mountains, and people started thinking, well, maybe we need a lodge up there somewhere. And in 1948, that sort of happened. We started thinking about it, and we thought about it and then stopped thinking about it until about 1951, when we started thinking about it again. And there was some wondering whether we should have a mountain ski lodge or a summer place to go. And someone said, well, we can just do both. And so in the late 40s, so between thinking about it, we started going to a place in Ice Lakes, something called the Ice Lake Chalet, which is part of on the Serene Lakes, and people like that, and that made some support for having a lodge. And then, but we were not decided where, and so we considered all the passes. So US 40, which is now I-80, the Donner, US 50, which is Echo, 88 Carson, 4 Ebbets, and 108 Sonora Pass. They considered all these things. We wrote letters to what was the highway department back in the day. I'm going to tell you what that was. We sent questions to the Division of Highways, Department of Public Works, which is obviously became Caltrans at some point. And they wrote back, and there wasn't really much to say about any of these places. This was before Eisenhower became president, so the interstate system was not really in anybody's mind at the time. So there was no future I-80 discussion. But apparently there was still this bottleneck in Placerville back in the day, just as it is today. But the bottleneck apparently to be, based on what I read, the bottleneck seemed to be between Placerville and Camino, not Placerville itself. So they must have fixed that bottleneck to get another one. Anyway, so the finalists became down to the US 40, Donner, Summit, and Echo, and a group went to, this might be another, maybe it's the next slide, so we'll just leave it as that, and I'll come back if it's not. But we would sort of down to these two, other hiking clubs have a place on Donner, and at the end, of course, obviously, Echo won out for us. So this is the story. This is where the lodge is. If you haven't passed it, it's off of 50. It's on Johnson Pass Road. And you can see a picture of it, sort of back in the day there. So we took a trip to up in that neck of the woods, and we went and camped at this place called Furs, which, as far as I can figure, is no more. But there is a Furs track along 50, and maybe that's sort of where they went. I'm really not quite sure about that. But one of the things for this camping trip was to inspect this lodge. So the owner of the lodge at the time was Ray Butler. This lodge, this place, had been a place, for a very long time. Okay. So this Johnson Pass Road is named after a Johnson, of all things, who built a toll road to supply Nevada mines. This is back in the day. And this roadhouse appeared on it, quote, where a teamster could get a shot of whiskey to wash down the trail dust. And later, this place, this toll road place became a gas station. I guess it wasn't a toll road anymore, but it became a gas station where you could get meals and a room. So it sort of evolved, and at this point it was, when we bought it, it consisted of a small grocery store, dining room, bar, and kitchen on the first floor. the bar for CAC members is the main entry level dorm. Let's see. On the second floor, there were 9 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, and a ladder outside the window for a fire escape. You can see the ladder. The upstairs attic. There was a second floor that was unfinished at the time, and so this property is located on El Dorado Forest Service land, and so we have a renewable use permit that we renew every now and then. We bought the lodge. The asking price, as you can see here, was $11,500, and we could pay half down and then pay it off in 4 years at 4% interest. We bought it for $10,000, and thanks to Mr. Pinther, Al, one of the 3 good buddies that we have that seem to have money all the time, he loaned the club $5,000, and then we made up with club members. We made up the other $5,000. The thing, so you'll notice that the ask was $11,500. Between the finding the place and negotiating, Mr. Murphy dies. Mr. Murphy. Did I write that down wrong there? Mr. Butler. Well, doggone it. Okay, speed it up. Anyway, the wife says, no, 10,000, and so that's why the 10,000 came from. And this is funny for those of us that go up there. This is a snip from a video, but even back in '53, there was you can't. We're not the highway department saying we're not going to guarantee you we're going to plow this road. So, and people have had trouble getting there and getting out of there. So now we've sort of bought everything, and now we're going to show a little bit of about stuff along the way that I thought was interesting that you're going to think is interesting because I think it's interesting. And that is, we had a club photographer back in the day. We didn't have iPhones, and even though cameras were sort of easy to get, I suppose, and we can see that there are ads in our trails from back in the day, 1920s, saying, "Come get a camera." Not many members had them, and so we had an official position. We gave this fellow Halliday, familiar name, money to buy film and to buy albums, and if a member wanted a print, they just needed to ask and give Mr. Halliday some money. One of the things we did also was to put these hiking registers on top of many peaks, and this is an example of the register on Mount Helena. And we did them on many of these peaks and maintained them for a while, and it's a thing that who really knows if we still do, and I don't think we do, but at some point we stopped doing it, but we did it early on, and we climbed peaks. This is our trip to Mount Whitney, where we summited Mount Whitney, 37 members. Back in the day when trains went someplace in California besides across it, we took a train to Porterville and then, got to near Porterville in a car, and then we hiked a lot. And here's sort of it. I don't know if you can read that, but we're hiking sometimes 17 miles a day. That's beyond my capacity these days. I think it's always been beyond my capacity. Anyway, so it's just, we had a nice, I'm not going to take the time to read it, but there's a lot of nice things that were said about this trip. And I think everybody had a pretty good time. And it's very clear that we were hardy people back in the day. We did moonlight walks. And remember that a lot of us lived in San Francisco back in the day, and we're still before the Golden Gate Bridge. And you'll notice that in this sort of goes with the last thing. There's a lot of advertisements in the trails from jewelers, and we would post these things about moonlight walks, and we were known as one of the things we're known as the matrimonial club. So, and there were a lot of marriages that resulted from this, and every one of them was blissfully happy. All right, so these are some of the things we did. Now I'm going to talk about some of the famous people. And so we're sort of getting close to the end of my time here on stage. So anyway, this is thanks to Nancy. So Emma Ryman, back in the day, there was the women's Dipsy run because they couldn't participate in the Dipsy race. And Emma, out of the 5 years this thing ran, she came in first or second place 4 out of the 5 times that there was a women's race hike. So she was a very active member. She was president in 1936. She was on the board, prior to that. And she was our representative to the Federation of the Western Club Federation for a number of years. She was the chef on the 1937 high trip that took us to Grand Teton and Yellowstone. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then I say in 1941 she was the delegate. And there was this quote about how fabulous shape she was in, not breaking a sweat doing this thing. And this was in the newspaper, you can read. Men do sweat, and she didn't need to because she was in such good shape. She didn't get dirty either. No. She slipped in she took the car and then, no, she did it. Yeah, she did it. She was quite good. She lived, her family moved here in 1906 after the earthquake, and she lived around. One of the places she lived, I think after she was married, was on Dot Lane off of Edgewood. So, and I just wanted to this again was one of the high trip, but because Emma was the chef, I felt like I could have a liberty to talk about this. So there's 25 members. They left on a Greyhound bus, kind of a bus, but it was a brand name of a bus company that I didn't know. And there were 25 members plus perfectly fitting driver means that it didn't fit into the seat just so, but he meshed with the personalities of the other people. And remember, this is before I-80, so US 40, it sort of follows the current I-80. And this US 40 is usually the business 80s going through towns along the way. So the first night they went to Norden. So they left the ferry terminal in San Francisco and then drove to Norden. And I was hoping that Gareth, the tourist club guy, was going to be here, historian, because they gave us they gave us a member rate to spend the night at their tourist club lodge called Sierra House. This lodge would burn to the ground in 1943, and they have rebuilt it, and so they have a lodge. I'm thinking in the same place or similar place called Heidelman Lodge, but they did us a good thing. And then we drove, we meaning the bus driver, drove all the way to Wells. And if you've done that, you know that on I-80, it's doable because you can go 80 or more. But this is before the interstate. And so it took a long time to go from Norden to Wells. And they got there in the dark. And so the story of this Lorraine Powell struck me as kind of funny. This guy, he's recently married, but his wife isn't with him, and so he's sort of having a hard time, I suppose. And in Norden, he doesn't like trains, which he and I would not get along. But And so he suffered with them in Norden. And so when he got to Wells, they were camping, and you can probably read this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. It's dark because long drive, dark, and he wants to find a place not near the train and track. And if you follow 80, you know that Union Pacific is really close to 80 all the way, and I'm sure it was pretty close to 40 all the way. And and so he laid down his sleeping bag, and I think this is the way. I thought it was clever turn of words or turn of phrase how they did this. He found the one spot that was really close to the tracks to spend the night, and anyway, I thought that was a funny story about Mr. Powell, and we were very efficient, and every member that went on that trip got a refund because they came in under budget. So the thing cost $65, and they got $16 and some change back, every one of them. So, and they could have given a tip to the perfectly fitting driver, but maybe they didn't. So that was a famous. That wasn't a famous person, but that was a high trip. So now just a few slides about famous members. So Alice Eastwood, she was a long-time member of the Alpine Club. She led many hikes. Sweet of her, she purchased bonds. So we had these sugar daddy guys that gave us a lot of money for the lodge, but members bought bonds to help pay for the lodge, and then the club would pay them back if you say, here's my bond, I want my money back, and you would do it. It was kind of an investment. But she bought these bonds that she never asked for the money back. So good on her. There was an announcement, a story in our 1949 trails announcing her retirement, and she was 90 at the time. She was the curator of botany at the California Academy of Sciences, and she was 90. And in the story, there's these things she's talking about what she wants to do. She's writing more books. She's 90. Amazing woman. And she lived until she was 94. And the interesting thing is that her house was lost in the 1929 Mill Valley fire. Her house was on Summit. Matt Davis, another member. This is Matt Davis on a Tamalpais Conservation Club building. He had his own cabin that when he retired in 1932, he was building his own cabin. He was still working on that cabin when he died in 1938. But he's known for his trails, and here's just a story in the 1933 trails about getting back to work on his trails after recuperating from a leg injury. Gained weight, had to lose it again. So he must have, I think he lived in a city until he didn't. And this is just, we talked about this before, but this struck me as interesting. The Matt Davis Trail seems to be the pipeline trail, or largely the pipeline trail from back in the day. So the 1928 map shows it as pipeline. The current map shows it at Matt Davis, and it follows the same sort of path. So I'm sure he worked on it, but it seems like it was there as a pipeline even before. Another guy that I find pretty interesting, member, he wrote a story in a 1921 trails that was sort of interesting to me because I was at the time reading this book, Up and Down California, which is a survey party led by Brewer, who was hired by Whitney, who was a state geologist at the time. And they, let's see, I think I'm going to read this because I can, I suppose. So this is in the introduction. So Francis Fuqua, and I looked up how to pronounce it and listened to it, but I haven't pronounced it enough in my head. So anyway, this guy, he became sort of famous in his own right. Sierra Club board of directors and president in the mid 30s, and he edited Up and Down California and also wrote the intros to it. And one sentence is just kind of cute. back in the day, this is 1860, so California is not that old as a state. Immense resources seemed to lie all around, yet somehow they did not materialize with the expected abundance. Except for trees, maybe it was just harder to find than they thought. Anyway, so this was a club member, and this Up and Down California is a good read if you're interested in early California history. William Kent, I think everybody knows about William Kent. He was a member early on. His wife was a member early on. A lot of land we can thank William Kent for. And again, so wildfire thing, Roger Kent and brothers, so sons of William Kent, they were, this article that Nancy gave me is that they're listed as volunteers fighting the 1929 fire. It seemed to me, reading the story, that they were just on their own out there. They definitely weren't red carded. They were setting back fires, and they seemed to know sort of what to do, but I don't think they were invited in by the incident command team. They were just there doing their thing. But good on them, and they lasted. Let's see, a couple of things about our war time. So the club did experience war issues. They experienced the trails being closed because of military activity on Tam. In World War II, this is about, there were, in our trails, there were stars and stripes where they provided information about members, and we had regular printings of letters from people in the service in this mailbag section. So this was interesting to me, another thing that I know about, and that's why I'm going to talk to you about it. See, you notice the thing about those two trails? They're in the war, sort of towards the end of the war, World War II, but one trails is kind of regular paper color and the other trail is kind of brown paper color. What's going on there? You see, I think paper is hard to come by, and they have cheaper paper that they just can't. So the brown part means high lignin content, and it's kind of it turns brown because that's the color of lignin, and so they just had a hard time sourcing paper, I think, and they would take what they could get, and so they have high lignin content paper 1 month and regular old paper the next month. So you are bored silly about that, but I thought it was pretty interesting. In World War I, we started doing these, we formed a sweet box committee. Again, Bill Halliday Stationery Store was HQ for this. We had 74 members that served in World War I. 7 of them were women. At the time, we had 206 members. So they would meet at Bill's store and package up boxes of assorted goodies and mail them off with a note. And we did this again in World War II. We did it again in the Korean War. I'm not quite sure about the Vietnam conflict or war. But that now the Sweet Box Committee is what we call the Sunshine Committee, and it serves all members, and it's just provides help for members that are suffering some kind of hardship. And this is an example of a V-mail letter that was of a member that was published in the trails. It's just talking about the high quality of flour and whatnot on the ship, and you just dealt with it because what was the other choice? Nothing. And then the fact that they had some Australian beef and some New Zealand canned goods, and it was the reverse land lease, sorry, not land lease. So all talks have to come to an end, and this one does sort of abruptly. So we now have roughly 550 pledging units and about 600 and some members. So, and we have an active website, and you can welcome to learn more about our history and to become a member. Just easy as that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We do have time for a couple questions, and I want some clarity. In the back there, when you made mention of the West Peak being the tallest, I don't think everyone is aware that when they built the Air Force Base up there, they shaved off the top of the mountain to make
It's
it
no longer the tallest.
so it's effectively lower than the East Peak now.
Right.
And then the other thing too is you made mention of Belvedere Reservoir, which is the old Mill Valley Reservoir where Edgewood comes right in. And that again, a lot of the times if you're in the hiking trails, you'll see pipes kind of coming down. Pipeline was the most famous, actually named after Pipeline. But they would just dam up the little springs and stuff on the south side of the mountain and then just redirect the water. So again, local stuff that I know you know, but not everyone does. So thank you. Any questions? I have a quick one on the Federation, the Western Federation. Is that pretty active now? And how many clubs are there? Or can you talk about it?
So the Western Federation was very active, and not so active. So the question, you asked the question and everybody heard it. It's not as active now, but there is still such a thing. There are, and the California Alpine Club is still a member in good standing, meaning that we've paid our dues. Many members are on the books, but they haven't paid their dues in a while. So I'd say it's less active. I'm sure that COVID did a thing. The last in-person meeting was pre-COVID, just pre-COVID. But they still do meet, and we have a representative that attends. But I think the number of members is quite a bit lower.
Steve, with all of your back and forth correspondence, do you have much within all the building we've done out there, correspondence between ourselves and Marin County building inspectors and things of that nature, or did they just let you go?
So definitely, did everybody hear the question? It's just what kind of correspondence did we have or interactions did we have with the building department? So I don't think there was one when we had the lodge, but when we bought the lodge, there was no such thing. So it was catches. It was we did it on our own. There, we talk in the trails. There's a story about bringing the Berkeley boys over that were pretty good at electricity and we paid members to frame the Tam building because we wanted it done sooner than later. But for the most part, it was all volunteer labor, and there was no mention of any kind of inspection until we built the social hall. So I'd say not so much. And I a realtor friend, and he sort of agrees with the fact that back in the 20s and 30s in particular, no. Not yet.
Hi, I was curious about the tourist club, if you know anything about when they started, and did you have any joint adventures with them, or how much did you do things together at all?
I can tell you a little bit because I have it written down here. I'm pretty sure there'll be another talk, and Gareth.
Yeah, and we apologize because that was going to be half of the talk.
Right, that's going to be half the talk.
So he just wasn't. Yeah. So Steve, if you can talk about just interacting with them, did you do joint hikes or socialization?
So we don't do too much, but we did. We definitely interacted with all the clubs on the mountain during COVID to collaborate in terms of having a common response. And we do have some members that do try to outreach, but I really can't. Yeah.
Yeah, through history, when it was being built, were your friends or competitive or gang members going after each other on the mountain?
Yeah, so the thing that I do recall is that the tourist club started out mostly with German influences, and the Swiss Tel Club started out with Swiss influences, and the West Point Inn started out when the railroad closed, and we started out just by these newspaper articles saying "get out." So I think we had more of a mishmash of people, So that there wasn't competition at all. It's just how you found yourself getting involved with outdoors, and so didn't do we didn't do too much with the tourist club. There are a lot of stories of us doing things with the Contra Costa Hills Club, with the Berkeley Hiking Club. So we did do things with certain clubs, but not with the tourist club.
Yeah.
We are. Okay, well, I'll just mention real quick that several clubs started on Mount Tamalpais at about the same time. So Steve has mentioned when the California Alpine Club started. The Tourist Club started in 1912, and they built their lodge there in 1917 on Mount Tamalpais. The Tamalpais Conservation Club also started in 1912. So with those two in 1912, and I believe the California Alpine Club in 1914, there was a huge movement. And then the Swiss Club, which I know less about, although I used to live near where it was also started about the same time. So you had all these clubs. I think the California Alpine Club was, and the Tamalpais Conservation Club were two that were not aligned with a certain ethnic group. The Tourist Club being Austrians and German primarily, the Swiss Club, obviously. Thank you.
And that's Phil Rhodes, esteemed member of the Historical Society and constant contributor to Facts and Figures. So at this point, unfortunately, we're out of time. It is 8:30. A couple things, if you can say, 7:30. Sorry, it is 7:30. I can tell time. I learned how with the big hands and little hands. Sorry. If you can spend a moment to help us hang some chairs, do that. Just a reminder, it's going to get windy tonight. Make sure you recharge everything before the storm comes in. And again, thank you all for being here. Next meeting is on the 5th. And thank you, Steve.